Welcome. It is my great pleasure to welcome also our dear special guest today, Aleš Bártl. I hope you can hear us, Aleš.
Yes. Hello, everybody. I can hear you.
Perfect. So let's start. Today we want to focus on data sharing under UK REACH, and the question we are getting quite a lot: how much the data for UK REACH will cost to register chemicals under UK REACH. I'm really happy to have Aleš here with me today because Aleš has great experience not only with data sharing disputes but also with Board of Appeal cases. So Aleš is associate at Keller and Heckmann, and if you have any legal questions, Aleš is the perfect guy to ask. And together we will try to not only guide you through the provisions which are implemented in UK REACH, but also share some experience we learned on the way from EU REACH. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to ask. Use the Q&A window for that. We are here to answer all your questions, and our colleagues are here in regards to help you with your UK REACH compliance and EU REACH compliance. We are providing full package services. You don't need to take any notes because you will get the recording of the webinar, you will get the presentation from the webinar and our popular Q&A sheet. We will try to leave at least 15-20 minutes for your questions and answers. If we are not able to answer all the questions live during the webinar, we will come back with the Q&A sheet and all questions will be answered, and you will all get the Q&A sheet to your mailboxes. So we have a lot of grounds to cover today. We will start with legal framework for data sharing under UK REACH. So what provisions were translated or mirrored in UK REACH from the EU REACH, what data sharing models are considered for UK REACH, and a big part of today's webinar will be sharing experience and lessons learned from the EU REACH data sharing disputes and Board of Appeal cases. So, legal framework. REACH data sharing provisions were adopted under UK REACH, basically one-to-one. There were no changes, no major changes made, no changes at all made to Articles 27, 29, and 30 concerning data sharing. There were some provisions left out, but these were related to CEIFs and pre-registrations, which are no longer in place. So there is no point of taking these over. We will get back to that a little closer. And the transitional measures that the UK REACH adopted is that data sharing agreements that existed before January 2016 can opt for waiving certain obligations, but the main issue is that there has to be an unanimous consent of all co-registrants. So it's similar to what we experienced under EU REACH when the implementing regulation on data sharing was introduced in 2016. There, the CEIFs, the existing CEIFs, were also able to decide whether they want to continue with their current CEIF agreements or whether they want to change them. But the condition was that there had to be a unanimous consent of all co-registrants. So that's now adopted under UK REACH as well. And if the co-registrants agree on that, they can waive the obligations to itemize the costs of all data, and they can waive the obligation to include a reimbursement clause in the cost-sharing models. What consequences it can have, we will cover later on in a nice example. We are getting questions if there will be CEIFs under UK REACH and when will they start operating. So technically there will not be CEIFs, but well, legally there will not be CEIFs, but technically there will be very similar mechanism. It's called substance groups, and it has basically the same purpose and same meaning as we are used to in good old EU REACH CEIFs. So the co-registrants will automatically be matched in a substance group if they are considering registration of the same substance, and this will be done automatically by the UK REACH IT systems, either after submitting the grandfathering notifications and substance ID information within these notifications, or for new registrants after submitting an inquiry. And that includes those who will either completely register out of blue, so completely new registrants, or those who will file the downstream user import notifications and then subsequently an inquiry. How that works, we covered in previous webinars, but if you have any questions to that, don't hesitate to ask. So all the potential co-registrants will be gathered in substance groups. And as I mentioned, the substance groups will have the same purpose and same mechanisms involved as we are used to from the EU REACH under CEIFS. So the co-registrants will discuss the registration strategy, the cost-sharing model, and at the end, they will appoint the lead registrant to submit the lead registrant dossier on behalf of all co-registrants, and then the co-registrants will join with their member dossiers. The co-registrants within the substance groups should communicate either with the lead registrant if the substance group is already formed, or as a group as a whole if the group is still under formation. So if the lead registrant is nominated, they should communicate with the facilitation of the lead registrant. If the lead registrant is not nominated yet, they need to communicate all together. They will have all the contacts in the UK REACH IT system. All this should start on 1st May 2021. The deadline for grandfathering notifications is 30 April 2021. So right after the grandfathering notifications are filed by the UK companies, right after that, the substance groups will be created automatically. What was also transferred from the EU REACH is the mechanism of data sharing dispute and basically Board of Appeals or appeals which were filed to the Board of Appeal in the EU. So in the UK, the data sharing disputes will be filed directly to the competent authority, to the UK HSE, and the appeals to a similar body comparable with the Board of Appeal in the EU will be made to the first tier tribunal. And another question we are getting a lot is whether the existing EU REACH registrants will need to pay for the data they already purchased for EU REACH. And for that, I'd really like to ask Aleš to comment on that.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Tomáš. So to answer your question in short, in principle, yes. So there will be some sort of double payment for UK registration, but it will depend on the arrangement with the lead registrant, with the data holders, and it will also depend on what is your current arrangement on which you rely in the EU. So the typical issues to be considered is whether your existing data license agreements on which you rely in the EU cover also UK REACH. So this really concerns the core of data that are in the registration dossier. So you should double check what the license agreements that you received from the data owners provide, whether they limit themselves only to EU REACH or whether they are broad. So this requires basically some communication within your CEIF. It requires typically that lead registrants who usually is holding these data, these license agreements, checks himself. If your data licenses are only limited to EU REACH, you will need extension from the data owners to also cover UK REACH. And in our practice, usually the data owners agree to provide extension for UK REACH for free, because technically there is no new market, there is no new jurisdiction, because at the moment of EU REACH registration, UK was still part of the EU, so there is really no new market. There can be some small administrative fee charged by the data owners, but in principle it should be for free. But this is not automatic, so you may actually have some difficulties getting extension for free. So when you have secured that your data can be used in the UK as such, you have to look into your individual empowerment to use this data, to refer to this data, typically by way of LOA. So it's typically LOAs are only for data submitted for EU reach. So you will typically need extension of letter of access to cover UK reach. So there will be some negotiation again within CEF, and the lead registrant usually agrees to extend LOAs to cover UK reach, or there will be arrangement to issue completely new LOAs for UK reach. And this will at least apply for newcomers, of course, because newcomers are not covered by current LOA. So as I said, this can go both ways. This can go either by extension of current LOA or by issuing a new LOA. Now, another key question: what will be the cost for data to be registered in the UK? So we have example of Korea reach, where typically EU dossiers are used in Korea for registration. So what the Korea consortia usually do is that they do not charge the same amount as was charged to EU registrants, taking into consideration that Korean market is smaller than the entire EU market. So they usually use some kind of proportion. It can be 3%, it can be 5-10%, but it should not be full cost of the data as charged to EU registrants. In principle, no one can really prevent data owners to charge the same amount, for example, like in the EU, because we have to take into consideration that when the EU data were used for when the data was used for EU registration, the data very often was also already, let's say, a bit dated. They were paid already several times to the data owners, but anyway, they were charged in full to EU registrants. So the same situation may in principle apply also in the UK. But again, we think that it's fair and proportionate to really charge only proportion. And we also have to, regarding the last bullet point of this slide, we also have to take into consideration that if the data is too expensive to be provided to UK registrants, and UK registrants would be obliged to generate data on their own, they may end up by approaching cheap labs using not very reliable data, which may lead into generation of bad data that can ultimately compromise the status of your substance in the UK and maybe ultimately in the EU. So again, the EU registrants and EU data owners may have incentive not to make life of UK registrants too difficult, and not to push them to duplicate the data and to maybe end up with bad, non-reliable data. Next slide, please. So on question, how much will it cost? It can be anything between zero and full cost of the data. But as I said, full cost of the data will probably not be very common situation. And we also have to take into consideration that UK reach will be administered by the same data and cost sharing principles as EU. So every data sharing must be based on fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory basis. And as final examples, if your LOA has been provided for a reduced price for EU reach only, you need to purchase data for UK reach. But if your LOA grants unlimited data access to particular jurisdictions, you should be allowed to use the data for UK reach. So again, you should really check what empowerment, what rights does your LOA, specific LOA that you received from the data from the lead registrant, whether it's limited to EU reach or if it provides unlimited data. And if it provides access to EU reach only, then you should double check that you received a discount for this LOA. Because typically LOA for EU reach only were cheaper than LOAs that provide no restriction of use of data. And if you pay the same price as unlimited, as those that have unlimited access, you should request reimbursement, because it's not your price has not been set on a non-discriminatory basis. Now I pass the floor to Tomáš.
Thank you very much, Aleš. There were some really important points that we will mention once again when we go through individual cases or examples of ill practice. I just spotted a few questions already in the chat window and Q&As windows, which are directly to what you just said. Doreen is asking that, according to her opinion, it's strange because although there is basically same obligations, there will need to be two registrations in most cases, one in the EU and one in the UK. So meaning two registrations, two letters of access, two fees. And that's exactly what happens here. We covered that in previous webinars, but that's even though the obligations are basically the same in the EU as well as in the UK, you still need to comply with both legislations if you want to trade on both markets. So one in the EU, one in the UK. Lisa was also asking, how about the unanimous consent? If you need to seek permission from the EU data holders and EU co-registrants to be able to register in the UK. You basically answered that in your contribution, Aleš, that you always need to agree with the data holder, no matter where he is from, no matter if he has anything to do with EU reach, if he's in the US, in Asia, wherever. You need to agree with the data holder what the conditions for the sharing of data and using them for UK reach, what the conditions will be. Am I right?
Yes, and regarding the unanimous consent, for example, to waive cost-sharing model or reimbursement mechanism, this indeed has to be redone in the UK, because there is no automatic transfer of CIF agreements from the EU to the UK, so it has to be always redone. And regarding the first question or comment, if we talk about fees, of course fees, it's something else. Fees for registration. There is a duplication, and there's no way how to avoid the duplication of fees for registration as such.
Thank you. Yeah, the administrative fees, of course, are a completely different story. But when it comes to letter of access costs, that needs to be negotiated with the data holders. And also, Yvonne was asking who will nominate the lead registrant. That's exactly upon discussion among the potential co-registrants. So those who filed or who will file the grandfathering notifications, those who will file an inquiry, will be put together to discuss and nominate the lead registrant, just like it was in the EU during pre-registrations, for example. Okay, let's move on. We will cover more questions at the end during the Q&A session. I just wanted to ask you, please, if you can post the questions in the Q&As window, not to the chat. Use the chat only if you have technical difficulties, please. Thank you. So what we already covered was what is the legal framework for data sharing. It's basically the same in the EU as well as in the UK. Everything was transferred from EU REACH, including the implementing regulation on data sharing. There will not be CEFs as such, but there will be a very similar groups of potential co-registrants called substance groups. And this will start on 1st May after the first deadline, which is the grandfathering deadline on 30 April 2021. As we just discussed quite extensively, yes, you will need to pay for the data unless you arrange with the data holders otherwise. But the data holders need to be really careful, because any newcomer can request to have access to the data on fair and non-discriminatory basis as everybody else. So at the end, it can all cost you anything between 0 and full cost of the generated data, but both cases, 0 and full cost, would be probably extreme cases, and it should be proportionate. So now let's take a look what we learned from EU REACH data sharing disputes. Before we do that, I also wanted to ask the audience a question. If we can put it on the screen. First, I wanted to ask if you already are holders of data that you might want to share or sell to future potential UK REACH registrants. I will give you 20-30 seconds to vote on that, just to see if we have in the audience any data holders, because this part will be particularly important for them. So can we put the results on the screen, please? Yes, we do. Okay. So let's jump to it. I will tell you a story, what lessons, and really important lessons, we learned from our first and so far the only data sharing dispute and Board of Appeal case, but it was quite an important and interesting one. The story starts with Paul. Paul runs a business. Obviously, he is manufacturing chemicals and selling them to Europe, including the UK now. And he happened to be in a CEF with an existing lead registrant, but the lead registrant had a slightly different position because he was a global company with many affiliates, big guy. But sometimes the bigger they come, the harder they fall. So when we started collaborating with Paul, it was back in 2017, and it was only recently that we were able to complete the registration in January 2021, because in the meantime, we had to go through the letter of access negotiation, which ultimately led to a data sharing dispute, Board of Appeal case, and so on. Important note here is that during all those years, Paul was still able to manufacture, still able to export, because the data sharing dispute and the Board of Appeal case had a suspensive effect. So when we filed the first registration in 2018, even though there were some negotiations and disputes going on, the business was uninterrupted. So back in 2017, it already began with a very simple case where Paul asked us to register his substance. He told us that he would like to register it in the 10 to 100 tonnage band. And we found out that there were 2 registrants by then, and they happened to be from the same holding. So it was a mother-daughter company. That's where the story begins. So it was March 2017, and we started with a simple question to the lead registrant, if he will register in the higher tonnage band of 10 to 100, because at that time he had it registered only in 1 to 10. He said yes, they have this intention. So we asked when, and they told us February, March 2018. So far, so good. So we asked about the price, if they already know what will be the estimated costs for the higher tonnage band. And the answer was that no, but we don't. We already know what will be the costs for the lowest tonnage band. So we asked what will be the costs, and we got an answer that it will be roughly 70,000 euro for joining the registration. And here I need to ask again the audience, what was the highest price you encountered when you were buying letters of access for EU REACH registrations? Can you run the poll, please? Because I've seen joint submissions, I've seen letters of access which cost really nothing, 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 euro. Then I saw similar size substances, similar size sieves, which cost really 50,000, 70,000. So there were a lot of there was a lot of variability in the letters of access prices, and not always quite justified. So can we see the results of the poll? Okay, sorry, this is a different question. I wanted to ask a slide later, but maybe I mixed it up a little bit. But let's take a look. If you during your negotiations with the registrants got the itemized breakdown of costs, because that will be the next important thing. Okay, so when it comes to cost breakdowns, 25% of our participants today didn't ask for cost breakdown. Only 6%, that's good news, didn't get a cost breakdown even after trying to get it, whereas most of you got it either immediately or after some hesitation. That's good result. Let's take a look at our case. We asked for a cost breakdown because the first information was 70,000 and no justification. So that's when we asked for the cost breakdown. It took 3 months to get it, but after all, we got it. So roughly 50,000 was testing costs and 20,000 was administrative costs. Don't forget, there were already 2 registrants. So in total, we were assuming that the tests must have cost something around 150,000 euro, because we were the 3rd registrant and we should pay, we were asked to pay 50,000 for tests and 20,000 for administrative costs. So we asked for cost breakdown, we got one. Can I ask, please, to run the poll on the letter of access price before I continue? So just to see where we are, I wanted to ask you, please, if you can share what was the highest price for the letter of access you had to pay for EU REACH registration. And let's take a look at the results. %, over 100,000 euro, and the rest seems to be quite evenly spread in all different ranges of costs. thank you for answering. So it seems this is really a hefty item to purchase the data for registrations. And that's exactly why we wanted to make sure that you are aware of your rights when you start negotiating the prices of letters of access for UK reach. So this was the cost breakdown we got. Quite nice. I have to say that all tests are clearly identified here, but still we identified several issues with this cost breakdown. So we started asking. The issue was that our substance was corrosive, skin corrosive. That's when I picked up the phone to call Paul again. And I was asking, Paul, are you in? We think we can save you some money on the letter of access price. He said, sure. What's the catch? Well, we will charge a commission. We will not charge anything up front. But if we are able to save you some money, we will charge a commission. He said, okay, fair enough. Sounds like an offer I cannot really refuse. Or can I? And we started negotiating with the lead registrant. The issue with the cost breakdown we got was that there was an item of skin sensitization tests for several thousands of euro, which we don't really need if the substance is corrosive to skin, because you can waive the data. It doesn't really make sense to test it for skin sensitization when it's already corrosive after contact with skin. And the lead registrant answered that they were doing all the tests in parallel, and only then they learned that the substance is skin corrosive. He said, fine, that's okay, but we don't need those data for skin sensitization. So we don't want to pay for this decision of yours that you ran the tests in parallel. So after some negotiation, it was not only the skin sensitization data, but to keep it short, after some negotiations, we were able to reduce the price to 50,000. So that was quite significant amount already. So we continued. Still, it looked quite a lot because still we were at 50,000 multiplied by 3. Some 150,000 euro when we knew that we could have the complete set of data, set of testing data generated in a testing laboratory for, let's say, 80,000, maybe 100,000 euro. So we asked for a proof of the costs for invoices. The lead registrant didn't really respond to that. And that's an obvious foul. The costs always need to be justified, and a proof needs to be presented. So then we started reviewing the CIF agreement, and we found that there isn't any reimbursement clause for cases when any new potential registrants would be joining. So in future, if 10 new registrants would join, we should be entitled to a reimbursement, because the costs need to be shared among all registrants on a fair and non-discriminatory basis. This clause was missing. We asked the lead registrant if he can introduce it. He said that he is using an internationally recognized template of the CIF agreement and doesn't want to change it. Another foul. Then there was a teleconference organized to unblock the situation. We really didn't want to go for data sharing dispute unless we really tried hard to rectify all, we really tried hard to come to an agreement. So we organized the teleconference, and after the teleconference, the lead registrant said, if there is any further communication or negotiation of the letter of access price, we will need to charge you upfront 2,000 euro just to make sure that you don't run away after the negotiations and not sign the CIF agreement. So we will give you the money back. It's like a deposit. If you register, we will give you the money back. But just to be sure that you will not run away, we will charge you to 2,000 euro. And that was another foul. So long story short, we asked if they already have the cost estimate for the higher tonnage band. They said yes. It was March 2018 already, the deadline was approaching, and the higher tonnage band letter of access price cost over 200,000 euro. So then we spent some more time with negotiations, including if they can prove the costs with invoices, again not. And we reviewed the draft CFA agreement for the higher tonnage band again, and we found that there is an affiliation clause that tells that a holding can pay a single letter of access price and give the data to all their daughter companies, sister companies, to their branches, to their affiliates free of charge. We said, we don't want that. This is not fair and non-discriminatory. Can you please update the CFA agreement? And the answer was no, that they don't want to change it. So we had no other option than to file a data sharing dispute. The lead registrant said, okay, that's your right. So we did. Several months later, we got a decision from ECHA. ECHA acknowledged that we made every effort to come to an agreement and that there were obvious fouls made by the lead registrant. So they granted us access to the data. We started celebrating. I even wrote an article about it to Chemical Watch. But it was still not over, because as promised, the lead registrant filed a Board of Appeal case. The Board of Appeal case was decided 2 years later, and it dismissed all the claims made by the lead registrant. Either they were dismissed completely as inadmissible, or they were turned down because the lead registrant broke the rules, and broke the rules exactly in the items I highlighted. So finally, in January 2021, we were able to finalize the registration. Paul was asking me if it was worth it. So I told him we saved you some money. He asked how much. And at the end, it was some 120,000 euro, because the lead registrant was asking over 200,000, and including all the tests we needed to make, all the data we needed to generate, paying the ECHA fee and all the consultancy, including our commission, still cost only 84,000 euro. So Paul was happy at the end, and I have to thank hugely to Aleš, because he supported us in this whole process, and there were some lessons learned on the way. Aleš, if you can comment on that.
So you already, Tomáš, mentioned Regulation 2016-9, the implementing regulation on data sharing and cost sharing. So it provides great support for your data sharing disputes with the lead registrant, because it provides very, in a straightforward way, all the principles that Tomáš very nicely illustrated in this example. That means all costs must be itemized and justified. You only are required to pay cost or to pay for data that you need for your own registration. These are the two core principles, and they are very clearly set out in this implementing regulation, to which you should make always a reference. The affiliation clause that Tomáš mentioned, it was decided in these breakthrough Board of Appeal cases in summer this year. And it actually, the provision that affiliates of registrants do not have to pay for their own registration, it comes from the old 2010 CEFIC model CIF agreement. So a lot of lead registrants were using this template in good faith, that it's something that has been agreed, endorsed and that is in line with REACH principles, but it clearly is not, because why would big ones that have 10 affiliates have to pay only for one registration? It doesn't make any sense from the fairness perspective. So this was struck down by the Board of Appeal. Now, of course, it in principle, it now allows entitles registrants to require retroactive reimbursements, because in principle the cost sharing, the reimbursement should now be completely redone, taking into account affiliates of the registrants. We think that in practice the retroactive reimbursements will not be very common, because it creates a lot of administrative work. It can be assumed that the lead registrant and other registrants will not be very willing to retroactively reimburse other registrants. So it would end up again with data sharing disputes. So we think that retroactively, probably it will not be very common. But what needs to be done for sure is to recalculate prices of letter of access for the future in the EU and in the UK from the point zero. So if you have relied on free riding of affiliates in the EU, you definitely should recalculate your prices and change your model in the UK, because free riding of affiliates is not possible anymore. Another recent Board of Appeal case held, or the Board of Appeal held, that cost incurred for managing consortia cannot be included in the LOA price. So again, it emanates from the principle that registrants should only pay for the data they need for their registration. Managing consortia that very often are for several substances, not only for one substance, but for a group of substances, is not automatically related to the registration of the substance, to the data that you need for your registration. It can be maybe justified as an administrative cost, but only if justified. So again, managing consortia in principle cannot be imputed to the LOA applicants. No entry barriers possible. So again, this is something that Tomáš illustrated in their example. Some costs for example NDAs, or some costs, some payment in order to start the negotiation for real, as in the example, or late entry fees. That means that the LOA applicants joining later would be charged some late entry fees. All this has been struck down by the Board of Appeal in the landmark Honeywell case 17/2013. That really set out the rules, how to behave and how to communicate with the LOA applicants. And of course, again, as emanates from Regulation 2069, every data sharing agreement, every de facto CIF agreement has to include reimbursement mechanism that will take into account future registrations. And don't forget that every data sharing agreement also has to include specific provision on costs related to future substance evaluation. Because with respect to dossier evaluation, it's rather straightforward, because dossier evaluation always requires data for specific tonnage band. So there it's kind of obvious who will be obliged to provide the data, only the registrants in the specific tonnage band. But substance evaluation decisions are often addressed to all registrants, irrespective of the tonnages. That's why Regulation 2069 provides that registrants should agree how they will share the costs related to substance evaluation. Next slide, please. So Tomáš mentioned data sharing disputes. I will provide now some figures to illustrate how data sharing disputes are used and what are the typical outcomes. So by October 2020, there were 108 data sharing disputes. 67 were in favor of claimant and 41 in favor of data owner. So again, it looks like it's more favorable to LOA applicants. Now, most common grounds for LOA applicants to get award: unjustified delays in providing the LOA cost, lack of transparency regarding the cost sharing mechanism, lack of justification of I have difficulties now reading the slide. Lack of transparency regarding the lack of justification of costs, lack of justifications for surcharges. Again, surcharges very important. There should be no surcharges. Tackling on annual fees with justification, lack of proof of study costs, and lack of reimbursement mechanism. And most common grounds for denying the claim is that it's not a last resort and not all efforts exhausted. So this is very important. Even if you think that you have good grounds that you should receive the data, or that the LOA applicant should not be granted the data, if you file data sharing dispute prematurely, then the Board of Appeal will dismiss, the ECA will dismiss your data sharing dispute irrespective of whether you are right or not. So really, you should try until you really hit the dead end. And by hitting the dead end means that the other party simply either stops communicating or repeats the same argument without providing any new element. And of course, everybody knows from the ECA guidance, from the very already well established, there should always be a maximum 1 month between the communication. So we have 1 month to react within data sharing dispute. If you exceed 1 month, then it can already be applied that you are not doing best all efforts. Next slide, please. I think this is yes. So this is already for you, Tomáš.
Thank you, Aleš. Thank you. This was really important to see the particular cases that explained the provisions which were already implemented, but now there's quite some clarity, and as you mentioned, it's quite favorable for the letter of access applicants or new potential registrants. Another important milestone which is now approaching is that the 12-year grace period, the 12-year data protection period is now approaching for the first registrations filed under EU REACH, and the UK REACH implements the same provisions. So basically, newly generated data either for EU REACH or UK REACH will have 12-year data protection period, but after that, they could be used for UK or EU REACH registrations free of charge. One important note is that costs for the letters of access might be also higher than they were for EU REACH because of smaller thieves or substance groups. Because if you have, let's say, 10 registrants for one substance in the EU, and for the same substance, you might have only 3, 4, 5 co-registrants, then the cost per member registrant might be at the end higher than it was for EU REACH. But again, it all depends on the negotiations with the data holders. That's the bottom line. So some take-home messages. Substance groups, similar to thieves, will be formed after the 1st of May. Data sharing arrangements will need to be made and negotiated basically from scratch. And it holds that fair, transparent, and non-discriminatory principles are essential. You have strong instruments to fight for your rights. It costs some time. So of course, if the letter of access price seems to be very high and unjustified, it's worth it. If everything on the first glance seems to be in order, there's probably no need to negotiate hard. So with that, I would like to thank you. We will try to answer at least 1 or 2 questions. All the rest we will answer after the webinar and send you the Q&A sheet. I would like to thank Aleš first of all. Thank you very much for joining us today. I would like to invite you all to the next webinar. In 2 weeks, we will take a look at another important topic. Why is it so important to choose a really good owner representative? You can already register for the webinar. It will be free again. And we will also be leading the post-Brexit compliance stream at a conference in April. So there, if you want to learn more about all different aspects of UK REACH and post-Brexit compliance, we will be able to go more into details. Don't panic. The button still works at every decent consultants. I believe it also works at Keller and Heckmann. Please correct me if I'm wrong, Aleš.
It does.
Great. So let's take a look at one or two questions. So my colleague will now launch the questions we got. Rhiannon is asking if cost-sharing models should be recalculated for new registrants. Would that not mean that they pay different amounts to existing registrants and be unfair?
Yeah, I think this relates to the affiliates issue. Yes, exactly. This would mean exactly this. But at least it would prevent data sharing disputes with new registrants.
Yeah.
As I said, if you feel like being an icebreaker, because I so far I have not heard about requests for retroactive reimbursements. But probably there are already maybe disputes forming in this respect. You would probably be successful. Now you have to take into consideration that you will probably have also costs related, and maybe that's why there are not that many Board of Appeal cases, for example, on data sharing, because it's legal fees that you incur with the Board of Appeal are very often higher than what you would actually get as reward, because the fee, the appeal fee to the Board of Appeals is only some 7,000 euros if you are a big one, but you have to take into account legal fees, and if you win, you are not reimbursed legal fees, importantly. So yes, you will probably be successful, but you have to wait what you would get and what you would have to pay.
It's perfectly legal and perfectly okay if all the co-registrants agree that they want an affiliation clause in their CIF agreement. It's perfectly fine, but all have to agree. And the problem is, if there is a newcomer and he says, sorry guys, I don't want that, then they need to change it completely and reimburse. So that's the issue, but it's perfectly fine if they all agree. They can have in their CIF agreement even the affiliation clause. So one more question. Hakan is asking, is there any obligation to make a joint submission for the substances jointly registered under the EU REACH? That's a good one. Yes, basically there is. There wasn't from the beginning of, from the onset of REACH, But lately, with the, I think it was with the dossier updates, but maybe even before that, with one of the implementing regulations, it was clearly said that joint submissions are the option which the co-registrants should pursue, and the individual registrations are only reserved for cases when there is only a single registrant. But even in that case, he can formally file a joint submission. So yes, long story short, when there is an option to join any existing registration, you have to do that, unless, yes, please.
Sorry, again, the implementing regulation 2016-9, it reinforces the one substance, one registration principle, and this has been taken over into the UK REACH. So,
yeah.
so it's the same.